Hello and welcome to And Still We Rise. I'm your host, Christine Seidel, and today we have Allison Robinson returning to continue our conversation on conscious dating. Welcome, Allison.
Thanks. Happy to be back.
Yeah, so very excited to have you back. And we could probably do 60 series, like 60 episodes on this series because there's so many things to talk about. And you've probably already listened to the episode prior to this one, but if you haven't, just go back, listen to a little bit of that. You'll hear a bio and an introduction of Allison and the work that she's doing at Rise Therapy Center. And so we're going to get back into our conversation of conscious dating. Last episode, we kind of talked about a little bit more of that like self work and what you needed to kind of prepare for. Now we're going to get into kind of the meat of putting yourself out there. So, what are some of the main things you need to be kind of prepared for or be intentional and conscious of as you step out into dating?
So I think that one of the biggest things is having a healthy mindset regarding dating and a healthy mindset about who you are. So one of the biggest ones is just having this belief that I am worthy of receiving the love that I desire.
Mm-hmm.
Because when we feel like we're worthy of receiving that love that, we talked about in the previous episode, evaluating our wants and our needs and what we're searching for, we're much
Mm-hmm.
more confident in, you know, telling ourselves it's okay if this
Yeah.
connection doesn't work out and
Mm-hmm.
focusing on the direction that we want to go.
Yeah, and I think that self-work of getting to that mindset of like I'm worthy of what it is I desire and that I can be in a place of dating confidently and without a feeling of scarcity. I think that really sets you up to have a better dating experience. Um, when we go into dating with a little bit of this doubt or hesitation, we tend to receive that in the dating experience. And then, kind of puts us into that cycle of fear of like, am I ever going to find somebody? Is it ever going to happen for me? So, really being in that place of like, I'm going into dating, knowing who I am and what I bring to this world. And I'm not going to be disheartened if it doesn't turn out right away. So, really
Yeah.
being in that secure and confident place. So what about when you start meeting people? How do you maintain a mindset? Like what are some things to be really mindful of as you're going into the interfacing of people where, as therapists, we know that's where we start getting a little staticky is when we are kind of
Mhm.
confronted with other people that may or may not be mirroring, what we authentically feel like we're putting out there, or we may be triggering people and people may be triggering us.
Yeah, so I think one of the things that I feel like is most important when you're in this space of like seeking companionship is like the goal is to meet your life partner for a lot of us
Mm-hmm.
in the dating world. However, when you're approaching a date on like a standalone basis, the goal really shouldn't be I want this relationship to work. Like this is my person. So, and instead redirecting it to what can I learn from this person? What can I
Mm-hmm.
benefit out of this connection? And something in a previous relationship, we were going through this evaluation process and we were deciding whether or not to enter a commitment. And we knew we had a clash in values and goals.
Mm-hmm.
And, I wasn't far enough along in my journey to kind of just kind of disengage, but it turned out to be for the good because I learned a lot
Mm-hmm.
because something that he said was, I never want to hurt you
Yeah.
and I want to leave you better than I found you.
Mm-hmm.
And then we decided to end it because we reached a certain part and was like, if we don't end it, then we're not going to fulfill that goal. And that was something that I carried on as I met
Mm-hmm.
future connections. So it's like, what can I learn from this? How can I benefit this person's life? How can they benefit my life in this moment, whether or not we continue on
Mm-hmm.
past tonight? And that led for like a lot more authentic connection and no expectation on either
Yeah.
end. And sometimes it was just authentic and genuine communication. Sometimes I learned parts
Mm-hmm.
about myself they would point out inconsistencies in what I was saying,
Yeah,
and vice
right, right.
versa.
Yeah. Hmm.
Yeah, so like, we're growing in this, and then I realized, like, as I kind of had this mindset and the attachment to this working out started
Yeah.
lessening, I started meeting a lot more people that were much more compatible.
I love kind of that growth mindset of like, what can I learn through this process? Not like, how can I find the one? It's more about,
Hmm.
let me just step into this moment and then learn
Hmm.
what I need to learn and step into the next moment. That takes so much pressure off of yourself to be,
Hmm.
in this energy of like achieving, achievement culture. Like I have to find the one, but rather like, let me be available to learn through this because as I learn, I grow. And as I grow, I change. And, it's all for this like self empowerment. And so, really having the mindset that, like, yes, ultimately, maybe I am seeking commitment and I'm very clear in what I allow, what I don't allow, what I'm available for what I'm not available for. But let me not become so constructed in the process that
Hmm.
I'm not learning. And because we can kind of get stuck in relationships longer than we need to be because we aren't really available. We're too constricted in like what we need it to be, which
Hmm.
brings me up to like that whole, yes, but this person has such great potential. We have so much fun. Like, ah, how do you grapple with that? Like, how do you keep your mindset still in a good place when you may be seeing like all this great potential in a relationship, but what's actually occurring isn't mirroring that?
Yeah, so I think it comes back to authenticity. And when we kind of approach it for that mindset of like, I'm not seeking for this person's work, I'm seeking long-term partnership, I'm seeking commitment, but I'm
Mm-hmm.
not seeking it with this individual. Because what that does is it helps us be true to ourselves in those connections. Because sometimes when
Mm-hmm.
we go into it and we're like, I want this person's work because they have this, they have that, they're who I want, they're everything, right? Or everything that I think I'm seeking, sometimes we put on a front and
Mm-hmm.
we're not being ourselves, and that can lead to a couple different things happening. And one of those, they think that we're the person of their dreams. We go through
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
thing and then we don't live up to their expectation. It's an unhealthy
Mm-hmm.
dynamic, or we spend the whole relationship continuing to fake that persona that we put on
Yeah.
and drain
Mm-hmm.
ourselves in the process. And the other part of it is, when we do show up authentically, we
Mm-hmm.
are we're confronting that fear of rejection, because it
Yeah.
is scary to completely put yourself out there, flaws and all, and say this person could either love me as I am or see me and reject that. And just
Mm-hmm.
because we may not be liked by certain people, it doesn't mean that we're unlikable. And so we're
Yeah.
confronting that belief as well, because
Mm-hmm.
we're giving someone the opportunity to say, I don't think you're my person, just like we're trying to do for them. And in that, we're being true to ourselves, and we're, if that were to happen and someone doesn't see us as the compatible partner, we can start to
Mm-hmm.
work on that belief and just say, I still have value, even though I don't fit this person's life that I really want to be with. And it can be
Right.
hurtful, but you know,
Yeah.
that's part
It
of
can be tricky.
acceptance. Yeah.
Yeah, it can be very tricky. And I think that like hopefully in that self-work phase, you've kind of been able to like grapple a lot of that out. But they can, those situations can sneak in where you're like, gosh, all of this person marks all of these boxes. But there is this one thing that like is so starkly contrast to like what I authentically want. And we can go into this very codependent type of behavior where like, let me shift and change part of myself in order to,
Hmm.
get what I want from this person. And, at the end of the day, like that in itself is as kind of manipulating not only ourselves but
Hmm.
somebody else. And you do kind of have to be very conscious about like, this is something that was non-negotiable for me, or I see all of these great possibilities that this person could become, and they say the right thing, and they, they set the intention, and yet their behavior is very different than what they're saying.
Hmm.
And so really being in communication with yourself, in communication with your support system to hear and see what it is that you need to hear so you don't get stuck in that trap of trying to manipulate something for what it could be versus what it
Hmm.
is right now. So that,
Yeah,
and I
yeah,
love
and that
that.
leads.
Yeah, yeah. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry, I didn't cut you off.
No, you're
Yeah,
good.
that kind of goes right into, the dating for potential, or not
Mm-hmm.
dating for potential, and dating
Mm-hmm.
for, who that person actually is.
Mm-hmm.
Because there's a lot of times we see like these aspects of this person, like, oh, like this is what I would do if I was in
Mm-hmm.
their shoes, and we kind of project like who they could
Yeah.
become, and we
Right.
completely negate they might be completely happy with who they are and they might be fine. And
Right.
that's
Yeah. Yeah.
perfectly okay.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes there's areas where, we should want to grow, but there's sometimes where
Mm-hmm.
it's like, no, like I like myself in these spots. It might not be compatible with what you're looking for in a partner,
Right.
but
Yeah.
we should accept that and not seek to change it. And
Mm.
and something that goes along with that is when you're considering potential and you're hearing someone, say all the right things and you're seeing
Mm-hmm.
their behavior not lining up, what I tell people is if they couldn't speak, they couldn't communicate verbally or through writing, what would their behavior tell you about how they
Mm.
feel about you and who they are as a person? Because behavior is a language, and it's honestly the most
It is.
powerful
Yeah.
one because it
Mm-hmm.
shows us your values.
Yeah. 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 It's a form of communication when, we learned that at the very earliest of all the stages of life is behavior to get some type of attendance. So it's something that we continue to use. And I think that's a great point. So when you talk about authenticity, how important is that when you go into the spaces of communicating with people? Dating is a funny, fickle thing. There's so many stories out there that are like, oh, I met so and so. They said they wanted this type of relationship, but like then all of a sudden they ghosted me. Like, what, how do you need to move into that space of like authenticity when it comes to meeting and communicating with people?
Yeah, so I think that just comes from a genuine place of like vulnerability in a way,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
because sometimes we might tell people like, hey, like I don't, you did this thing or I don't like that. And instead trying to shift it into, hey, like when I noticed when you did this, I was feeling this way inside myself. And, I think it might be because of this
Mm-hmm.
other factor. And I'm just wondering if there's a way where we can navigate through that and try to figure out, like, am I seeing things unclearly, or kind of like, what's your intention behind this? Because this is how it's
Mm-hmm.
making me feel. But I don't know if I'm necessarily even right to feel that way. I don't know if that's just
Mm-hmm.
myself.
I love that you formulated that as like feel secure enough to ask questions if you see discrepancies, to
Mhm.
seek clarification. If somebody is putting out there like I'm looking for something serious and is saying all these things and then yet has no time or making, the investment in getting to know each other a priority, to be able to say, hey, is this something that you're still interested in pursuing or have you changed your mind or whatever? And giving people the autonomy and agency to do that. I think a lot of people, with our ghosting culture, they will ghost because they don't want to have an authentic conversation and communication about maybe a change in feelings or maybe a change in like their focus of their life. It doesn't always have to be something like that feels so rejecting. It could just be like, I'm just not in a space right now where I thought I was, and if
Mhm.
we aren't in a place, I think, as individuals to go into dating with being able to be authentic in our communication, being authentic in what our intentions are, we probably need to go back and do a little bit of that self work. If it feels really uncomfortable to tell somebody, hey, like I had a great time with you, but I'm really having more of a friend vibe. Like if we can't say that, then we probably need to go back and do a little bit more work because playing
Mhm.
games, waiting, 35 minutes before you text back, like that's inauthentic energy. And somewhere there's going to be static that comes from that. So I think it's not only important to look at that in the people that we're interacting with, but like look at ourselves and be like, wait a minute, why am I having such a hard time saying this is a friend connection or this, that, and the other? What is it within me that's so uncomfortable with that?
Yeah, yeah. And I hear it a lot from women. The ghosting is a little bit more popular with how when they experience that. And I've also
Mm-hmm.
heard it from some of my male friends and like,
Mm-hmm.
people that I've dated where, they kind of are talking about their growth experiences. Like, it comes from a place of like, I don't, I still care about this person. Like, I don't want to hurt them. I don't want to tell them, that I'm not feeling it anymore. But yeah, there's
Mm-hmm.
one guy I was talking to, and he was like the hope is kind of what can fuel it with women that get so
Yeah.
I have to take their hope out back and kind of shoot it and just be like in a way that's caring and loving, but like
Yeah.
leaving that like hot and cold. It's kind of doing more
Mm-hmm.
damage, and I think that happens when men experience it too,
Yeah.
as well, because you're just kind of hanging on and you're in that back and forth, and it's a lot of people are trying to not hurt one another, but the caring thing to do is honestly be more authentic in our communication and be
Yeah.
like, you're a great person. I believe you deserve all these good things in life. I either don't feel like I can provide them for you, or kind of
Yeah.
these are things that I feel like are important to me. And I don't want you to change who you are to meet my needs, because
Mm-hmm.
that's unfair to both of us.
Yeah. And I think that that goes to like, inner self work, getting prepared to have a lot more mental and emotional tenacity to go through the dating process, to just be like, just let it be an enjoyable process without like a lot of pressure and constrictions within like, the people you're willing to meet and this, that, and the other. Because I think that that becomes like a vessel for the resistance you're going to meet. Now, I will say, in full disclosure, I have ghosted a few, but only when they have rolled up with those red flags. And I was like, nope, we're not, I'm
Yeah,
not even going to go down that road.
yeah, and sometimes you do kind of have to for your safety, because sometimes you can see
Mm-hmm.
certain red flags where it's kind of like, okay, there's certain personalities where it's like the best way to stay safe is to just not respond, because
Mm-hmm.
they communicate strictly through conflict, and then
Yeah.
basically they take that hurt and that shame that they're going to experience it, and they could be threatening. That I've experienced that as well with they felt
Mm-hmm.
rejection, and they kind of got a little crazy on me. So it's
Mm-hmm.
important
Mm-hmm.
to stay in touch with yourself and trust your intuition on when, and ask yourself, is am I choosing to ghost, or
Mm-hmm.
because I am protecting myself and this is what's the best thing to do? Or is it that I just don't feel safe in communicating these feelings? I don't want to hurt this
Mm-hmm.
person. And
Yeah.
that's a hard line sometimes. So
Mm-hmm.
I think it's just about like being genuine to yourself and knowing what is the appropriate way to navigate those individual
Yeah.
situations.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk a little bit about flags. Like
Mhm.
what would red, yellow, green, like what would they kind of be indicating? And can you give us some examples?
Yes. So first of all, let's start with red flags, because those are the first ones that you want to identify before you even get to like green
Mm-hmm.
flags, because red
Very
flags
true.
are automatic no's. They're just
Yeah.
like, absolutely not, I will not deal with this. And
Mm-hmm.
those can kind of vary from person to person based on what you're willing to tolerate, to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
So, but I think like in most situations, like dishonesty, like if you
Yeah.
don't have trust in a relationship, what do you have?
Mm-hmm.
Controlling behavior. Like if I can't be myself and I have to be who you want me to be, that's like
Mm-hmm.
typically like straight red flag. Um, you know, so lying, cheating, all of those
Mm-hmm.
things. And
Mm-hmm.
when we get to yellow flags, those are the ones we want to kind of watch. Like it doesn't mean like it's an automatic, like I'm going to like cut off immediately. Those can look like maybe a, an difficulty with emotional availability.
Mm-hmm.
And I say that's a yellow flag because it could go either way, because they
Yeah.
might be trying to date intentionally. And
Hmm.
they might be like, I'm not going to put all of myself out there and be completely vulnerable
Hmm.
before, like, 2 to 3 months. Like, I'll
Yeah.
gradually increase vulnerability, but, I'm not jumping all in until I know what I'm jumping all into.
Right.
So
Yeah.
that's when you kind of got to watch if you feel that. So they
Hmm.
should be kind of increasing and their
Hmm.
ability to connect emotionally. And if they're just kind of staying level and you've been dating like 4 or 5 months, that probably is a sign of genuine emotional unavailability and not
Right.
just
Right.
like them being cautious.
Hmm. Hmm. So the yellow flags are kind of where you get a sense that there's an area that they are experiencing maybe some discomfort or difficulties, and
Mm-hmm.
it's something that it's not harmful, it's not
Mm-hmm.
dangerous, it's not rooted in conflict, but it's an indicator that it may be difficult to establish a safe, secure connection with this person longer term. So it's not
Mm-hmm.
necessarily overtly harmful, but it could be if it doesn't get
Mm-hmm.
addressed, if it's not communicated, if it's bypassed or avoided, it could ultimately become a red flag that you've invested a lot of time and energy into.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
and another example is the complete opposite of that. They're jumping all in and like they're like
Mm-hmm.
excessive complimenting, they're future planning. And it could be like I've heard of situations where like no, like I knew she was going to be my wife or my husband on the first date. Like I
Mm-hmm.
still, approach things slow. Sometimes yes, sometimes no. Sometimes, you jump all
Right.
in and it works. Sometimes it doesn't.
Right.
So
Mm-hmm.
there's no there's no strict formula here. But in
Exactly. Yeah.
general, that would be considered a yellow flag because you're like, you
Mm-hmm.
just met me. Like,
Mm-hmm.
why are you
Mm-hmm.
saying that like I'm the love of your life? I'm all these things. Like we've been on 3 dates. Like, come on now.
Yeah. Yeah.
But at the
Right.
same
Right.
time, they could just know super early and they could just be very
Mm-hmm.
intuitive. So you just kind of want to watch that behavior and see,
Mm-hmm.
okay, is this starting to fizzle out? Is this shifting to, okay, she or he isn't jumping all in the same, let me start attacking or,
Mm-hmm.
trying to do like backhanded compliments to decrease their self-worth
Yeah.
to help them like
Yeah.
attach to me.
Mm. So I think it sounds like the yellow flags can be really tricky if you have not really done a lot of your own work to know how you like what your defense mechanisms are or how you validate or pace things, because that could be, what looks like a yellow flag can come from a very genuine place. Maybe this person is just really excited about getting to know
Mm-hmm.
you and feels like a very strong connection. But if they get angry or combative when you don't endorse it or when you don't commit, and, they start becoming very resentful that you're not giving them that validation in return. Red flag. If
Mm-hmm.
they said, I understand, like, you don't have to tell me how you feel right now, I just genuinely, want to communicate that to you, that's a green flag. That's saying, hey, I give
Mm-hmm.
you autonomy and agency just like I have, and in mine I want to share that with you. And so that yellow flag is just a place to say pause. And we've talked a lot about mindset, but I think so much of this is we experience it in our body. How does my body feel when
Mm-hmm.
somebody may be coming with something that looks like a yellow flag, and I confront it in a healthy way because I've been doing this work, and I'm comfortable and confident to confront things? How does my body feel when I do that and that person responds? It's a huge indicator of what
Mm-hmm.
direction these flags are going to go. If our body is feeling like overstimulated, overwhelmed, like it wants to contract, that's a red flag. We need to trust our body, even if our mind is saying, yeah, but like also like all this potential, and he came back and apologized. You know. So I think this is, we've talked about mindset, but so much of this is we also experience it in our bodies too, when we're in that place of like, what trajectory is this going to go when I place kind of a boundary or a line in not in the sand, but just a line to see what this actually is. How does this person respond? And that tends to be a good indicator of what side is that going to go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that's a good lead into green flags because in all of those scenarios where you have those yellow flags and maybe like we talked about before, you've done the work and you're comfortable addressing those in a way that's like, hey, like, I'm noticing this. This is how I feel. How are they respecting those boundaries that you
Mm-hmm.
set? Like,
Mm-hmm.
how are they responding to, like, for example, it's like, hey, I feel like a little bit overwhelmed by,
Mm-hmm.
how quickly, you're wanting to move and how quickly you're like wanting to progress this relationship. And if they are kind of trying to talk you out of like feeling that way,
Mm-hmm.
like that's definitely a red flag. But if
Mm-hmm.
they're like, what, I see where you're coming from, and I just wanted to, tell you how I felt, but we
Mm-hmm.
can take things at this pace. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
going to kind of back off and give you space. I'm not going to come on as strong, and I'm going to respect that boundary that you have
Mm-hmm.
there, and be
Right.
intentional with growing in this relationship
Mm-hmm.
rather than trying to like seal the deal right now.
Right. Right. Yeah. 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 I think that it's such a, you know, people who can be in discomfort and and be somewhat, see things as somewhat difficult. Maybe I really want to be in this relationship right now and like we can go have fun and I have all these things in my mind that we could be doing, but like she's not ready or he's not ready. Let me pause. Like that's kind of difficult for me and it's not what I really want to do, but I prefer this person to have like their own agency in making that decision than feel the pressure. If they can regulate themselves in that discomfort, that's such a big green flag, like such a huge,
It
because
really
all of a
is.
sudden, yeah, because then you feel safe to be able to like move forward in the way that feels authentic to you. And I think green flags do feel safe and they feel safe
Mhm.
consistently. This conversation has to come up or this boundary has to be placed. And that person is able to say, okay, I respect that.
Mhm.
I'll respond appropriately to it, or I may disagree. This is what I'm seeing. And they're able to come up with some other type of like understanding of how to navigate that if you still consciously want to pursue that. I think that that's, such a mis like understood situations that a lot of times before couples even come together to a commitment they've had some of this pacing difficulty and it's in that pacing difficulty that you really get to see who somebody is and where they're at and their availability to be a healthy secure partner. And so if you're not experiencing any of that, like whether it's like maybe somebody has kids and the other person doesn't have kids and so the availability is decreased, like how does that like come up when you're kind of talking about like setting time and getting to know each other. It could be a myriad of things, but it's in that dating phase that you need to have a little bit of that static to see how does somebody navigate that static. And if you don't, if everything is like easy and wonderful, it's coming. It's coming.
Yeah.
And it's better to have a little of that before commitment because once you're in commitment,
Mhm.
there's a little bit of resistance because you've most likely had a declaration. Maybe you've introduced family and friends. Maybe you posted on social media, heaven forbid. And now, yeah, right. Like now that there's this commitment, you're now seeing these things that have to be addressed, but they may be yellow or red. And there's a much harder transition into that, and it's much more difficult to confront it when you get to that place. So,
Mhm. Yeah, yeah. And I think the biggest things with the green flags are like respect, effective communication, emotional intelligence, trust. And in that situation that you just talked about, where the person is respecting those boundaries and communicating, like they're demonstrating all of those green flags with that
mm-hmm,
behavior. And so you can truly just kind of, decipher, you know, what is this like thing that I'm experiencing? Like, am
mm-hmm,
I is this a red flag or a green flag? And
mm-hmm,
and so with that, you are just able to try to see who they are, how they're going to communicate in the relationship, because that's kind of what you're
mm-hmm,
evaluating. Because relationships, like the biggest thing is healthy communication. So you're really able to see in the now, like you just said.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
who are they? How are they going to express their feelings toward me? How are they going to express their hurt or their anger or their feelings of inadequacy within
Hmm.
the
Hmm.
relationship? So it just tells you so much.
Yeah. And I think, also going through this process, like part of getting to know people is being vulnerable with who you are too. And, I mean,
Hmm.
I may have had a couple of little yellow flags myself, going through that
Haven't we
process.
all?
I probably have them. Yeah, I probably still have them now every once in a while. But I think like being available to also, be in a place of compassion and understanding and vulnerability yourself. This isn't about like, here's the matrix of what somebody needs to bring to me and they need to provide, but being open to vulnerability of like when you may have been a little bit of a yellow flag to be open to communication and say, hey, listen, like I am in my avoidant recovery and I was way overstimulated with work. And so any type of like, pull on me made me want to like just shut down. But that's something I'm working on. And I want to come in and process that with you. That's so important to be somebody who's also like conscious and cognizant of their own flags, you know, and
Yeah.
and being able to talk about them with the people that are pursuing them or that they are pursuing. So all of that to say, I mean, I'm glad I'm not out there dating.
Same. It's tough. It's tough. And
It is.
something that you said that I wanted to get your opinion on when
Mm-hmm.
you were talking about like, I have my yellow flags and
Mm-hmm.
they're probably still there. I'm wondering what your thoughts are if like you're meeting someone and for the first like part of your dating, you're not seeing any red or yellow flags. Is that a red flag? Are they being inauthentic and putting on a front?
Yeah, I mean, I think that that is definitely something that if all you're seeing is green flags, you really need to pay attention to your body and seeing what is my intuition saying, and am I giving this person enough access to see them with with the level of vulnerability that people need to be seen? And am
Mm-hmm.
I seeing him or her in different environments with different people? Among different people that I know, with people that are of higher status or lower status. Am I providing enough environments for me to really observe this person in that state? And to be honest with you, like there is like 6 or 7% of the population that have those really secure attachments.
Mm-hmm.
But if somebody seems like a green flag, let's say they've never been in a long-term commitment, they are 50 years old, like there are some things that developmentally you can go back and look and say, I'm curious as to why these developmental phases maybe didn't occur. And those are the type of questions I would start bringing up to people who are nothing but a bunch of green flags, because I would like to know, is that avoidance or is that just a lack of access or whatever it is, and see how people respond if you are not validating all the green flags, because that in and of itself is a red flag. That if you can't see something that might be a yellow flag, I'm not saying if there's red flags to be like, we'll let those go because all of these are green. I'm saying there should be some yellow flags. If you're not seeing
Mm-hmm.
any, that's something to talk about, and if they aren't receptive to that, then that's a red flag.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And something that, you mentioned there, like that's a red flag if like they're not open to talk about it or after you
Mm-hmm.
kind of point out these other things. But it's kind of also a red flag in you if you're putting on these rose-colored glasses that you haven't done all your self-work. If you're meeting this
Correct.
person, you've been dating months and you're like, this person's never done anything wrong and they could never have anything
Mm-hmm.
wrong with them.
Yes. Yeah. And I think that's one of the unfortunate things of, being out in the dating world and genuinely doing that self work and doing that healing work, is it's very easy to learn the language of healing. It's very easy to learn the language of like self work and the inner child and all that stuff. And people learn to say the right things. And so it's so important when we talk about potential versus behavior that you do give yourself time and somebody else time to see who you are and they are over the course of a consistent amount of situations. And it's, as therapists, we know like masking is a real thing. And,
Mhm.
we have to go into dating intentional and conscious, but also recognize it's a place of play, and we're here to enjoy our space because we genuinely want a partner to be a pleasure to be with and enjoyable. But we can't do that if we're just taking everything at face value, and we are masking ourselves. And that's the whole point of this series is what are some things, what are some highlights that you need to be aware of for yourself so that you can step into that, and then see if others are actually in that same space with you, or if they just learned how to show up to that table.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
even though I'm not dating, I love my partner, happily coupled, but I think with some of these, some of this advice, I'd feel better getting out there if that was where I was at. So I appreciate you sharing that with us. And is there any other advice you would give to our listeners or our viewers around, any other things to be mindful of as you step into dating in a very conscious way?
Yeah, I think it's also about we were talking about the red flags, and like you were mentioned, like, does my body feel safe? And
Mm-hmm.
I think a big thing that a lot of people don't do is give yourself permission to leave or end a relationship or not enter one if it just doesn't feel right. You don't need a big
Mm,
reason. You don't need them to do something. If you
yeah.
just aren't feeling it for whatever reason, you are fully
Mm-hmm.
within your right to end that connection, and you're worthy to
Mm,
do so. And
absolutely.
you should have the
Absolutely. I love
trust in
that.
yourself. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I think that's great advice that, I think especially for women, just because we've been generationally kind of conditioned to be compliant and pleasing, that,
Hmm.
if something feels off, if something just is genuinely just kind of a no for you, it's okay to say no. It's okay to say, it's not a match, that you don't owe anybody anything. And that was something I definitely said in dating, like, you don't
Hmm.
owe me anything, I don't owe you anything, we're just
Hmm.
getting to know each other. Because people be like, oh, I'm sorry I didn't text you good morning or good night. I'm like, please don't, like, like
Yeah.
we
Oh
are
my gosh,
not,
same.
like,
That
yeah,
drove me
yeah, I'm like,
crazy.
I don't need more text to respond to, because like you
Yeah.
don't owe me that. Like I have no
Hmm.
I have no expectation of that. And in return, if I say no to dating, like, I don't owe you a date just because you texted me good morning or good evening or whatever, for 3 days in a row. I don't owe
Hmm.
you a date. So really understanding that as you step into that space, like, the only person you are committed to at that point is yourself.
Hmm.
That's it.
Absolutely. Hmm.
So which leads us into our next episode and our next series, which is going to be about conscious commitment. How to enter into that, what are some of the highlights and the things to be aware of and the steps to take as you're ready to come out of the dating you know field and make a committed relationship. And I'm excited to hear more about that and just your advice and suggestions for all of our listeners. So thank you, Allison. As
Okay.
always, it's a pleasure to have you on here. And I know we're going to have many, many more series
Hmm.
and episodes around relationships, as that's something you're so gifted in. And I would just recommend anybody who is looking for some couples work or individual work around relationships to reach out. Allison is an awesome resource, and part of what she brings is just her authenticity and her genuine acceptance of where people are at, and really working towards where they want to be. So thank you, Allison, for joining. Thank you to all of our listeners and viewers. We'll see you guys next time. Bye bye.